Rolex had its humble beginnings, far from the luxurious timepiece it is today. It was the brainchild of an orphan boy that refused to give up. Who could have thought Hans Wildsdorf could conceive such a genius innovation, despite the adversities he went through after his uncles sold the prosperous family inheritance? Hans Wildsdorf was born on March 22, 1881, into a wealthy Pentecostal German family in Kulmbach. Though not for long, the silver spoon got snatched away from him very early in life. Hans's mother Anna died while he was very young, and about a year after her death, his father, Johann Daniel Ferdinand Wildsdorf, also passed on, leaving Hans and his two other siblings behind. Things became tough for the three Wildsdorf siblings. Surviving alone at such a young age was almost impossible, so his maternal uncles took over where their parents stopped. Other than caring for the three siblings, the uncles had a heinous plan, and it took the death of their parents to execute the plan. Hans's uncles sold off the Wildsdorf Steel Company that was supposed to be the inheritance from his dead parents, leaving the siblings with nothing to fall back on. However, despite his uncle's cruel decision, they did something right. He gave Hans an excellent societal standing. Hans and his siblings were enrolled in one of the best boarding schools at the time. Hans and his siblings received a world-class education. Hans would grow up to always sing praises of the standard education he had. In 1946, Hans Wildsdorf released a 4-volume book named Rolex Jubilee Vade Mecum, where he further reiterated how the badly thought-out decision of his uncles and the top-notch education he had made him self-reliant very early in life. Quoting his book, Hans says, "Our uncles were not indifferent to our fate. Nevertheless, the way in which they made me become self-reliant very early in life made me acquire the habit of looking after my possessions, and looking back, I believe that it is to this that much of my success is due." Hans owes his success in life to the brash attitude of his uncles. Hans became an A-list student. He proceeded to excel in his studies, performing particularly well in mathematics and language. He was so good in the two subjects that he got inspired to travel to other countries to work. During one of his numerous itineraries, Hans landed a job as an apprentice with an influential international pearl exporting company. Hans was a hard worker. He put his heart to the job, and the experience he gathered working within the international company would later play a crucial role in his future dealings. In 1900, Hans Wildsdorf took his first step into the Swiss watchmaking industry. That year, he moved to Le Chaux de Fonds, where he worked as an English correspondent. Remember, he is well proficient in the English language, all thanks to the sound education he was given as a child. He also worked as a clerk in the same firm called Messrs. Kuno Corten. Hans was paid a mouth-watering amount worth 80 Swiss francs. Kuno Corten flourished in the watch industry then. Although they manufactured a lesser amount of watches from scratch, they worked with all grades of watches. Kuno Corten had quite a grip in the watch business, giving them an edge over their contemporaries. They exported about 1 million worth of pocket watches at the time annually. Hans Wildsdorf's job description was simple but Herculean. He was responsible for winding pocket watches in their hundreds daily. On top of that, he had another duty to ensure all the watches were accurate. Getting actively involved in the process at Kuno Corten gave Hans in-depth knowledge of how all types of watches are built from the ground up. After serving Kuno Corten for a couple of years, Wildsdorf moved to England in 1903, working at another high-end watchmaking company. Wildsdorf gathered enough money while working for those companies, combined with the watchmaking experience. Hans Wildsdorf, alongside his brother-in-law Alfred Davis, established Wildsdorf and Davis in 1905. The company was situated at 83 Hatton Garden, London, officially marking Wildsdorf's surgeon into the world of watchmaking. The prime outlook of Wildsdorf and Davis was to provide never-seen, high-quality yet affordable watches. However, Wildsdorf and Davis struggled to gain their foot in the industry, owing to how wristwatches were frowned upon in the 1900s. Pocket watches were the highlight of society at the time, while wristwatches, referred to wristlets at the time, were mainly regarded as feminine objects. Regardless of the societal bias against wristlets, Hans was hell-bent on changing the narrative. Hans Wildsdorf was so dogged about watchmaking in 1914 that he wrote, "My personal opinion is that pocket watches will almost completely disappear and that wristwatches will replace them definitively. I am not mistaken in this opinion, and you will see that I am right." To perfect his art, he traveled to Bienne in Switzerland in 1905 to meet a certain Hermann Egler. He had previously heard of Hermann Egler in 1902 while working at Le Chaux de Fonds. Egler had already started producing ébauches, which are high-quality watches. Having ticked all Hans' boxes, he decided to grow his business through Egler. Hans made the largest order ever recorded for wristlets from Hermann Egler. The relationship between Hans and Egler flourished until Hans's Rolex company bought Egler a century later. World War I broke out a decade after Wildsdorf moved to England, about 14 days after the company's name, Wildsdorf and Davis, was changed to the Rolex Watch Company. Talking about how he came up with Rolex, Hans, during the 50th anniversary of Rolex in 1958, revealed he originally conceived the idea of Rolex in 1908. He further shared that having combined the letters, none of which was striking enough, a good genie whispered Rolex into his hearings on a ride alongside Cheapside, London in a horse-powered double-decker. Rolex, on July 14, 1914, achieved a trailblazing feat when it was awarded an A-class certificate by the Kew Observatory. The award dragged Rolex into the limelight, recording outstanding success. Before the end of 1914, Rolex had grown to have more than 40 employees. Sadly, the outbreak of World War I took a toll on business. In 1915, the British government implemented a 33% customs duty, and the fact that Hans was German didn't make it easier due to the growing hatred for Germans. Because of the hostility and harsh customs duties, Rolex was forced to move its international headquarters from London to Bienne, Switzerland. Subsequently, the headquarters was moved to Geneva, Switzerland, which has remained since 1919. Still undeterred from his dreams, in 1927, Rolex made and launched the first ever reliable waterproof watch called the Rolex Oyster. Hans Wildsdorf saw the potential embedded in the success of the Oyster, so he spent aggressively on advertisement. Exclusive dealers were selected in each town to sell and market the watch. Rolex provided the dealers with aquariums with plants and fish alongside the Rolex Oyster wristwatch to show its durability. On top of that, Rolex had its first brand ambassador, a female swimmer, Mercedes Glaetz. Mercedes was on a mission to swim across the English Channel, so Hans offered that she couple the Rolex Oyster to her neck chain, to which she agreed. Unfortunately for Mercedes, she almost died from the cold water and could not finish swimming across the English Channel as planned. However, a point was made that day, the durability and the high quality of Rolex Oyster. Similarly, Sir Malcolm Campbell also represented Rolex as an ambassador. After setting a new land speed record while wearing the Rolex Oyster, the time wasn't altered. It maintained accuracy. All these instances played a pivotal role in the development of Rolex going forward. To celebrate this feat, Hans published a full-page advertisement about the Oyster on the front page of the Mail for a whole month, celebrating the watch's success after 10 hours of swimming. Upon the death of his wife, Hans established the Hans Wildsdorf Foundation, a private trust in which some of the percentage made from Rolex would be remitted in honor of his wife. In 1920, the company's name was changed to Montrese Rolex SA, and then to Rolex SA, offering products under the Tudor and Rolex brand. From 1905 to date, Rolex has maintained its status as a symbol of affluence and quality. However, the Rolex Oyster wasn't the only amazing innovation from Rolex. In 1931, Rolex introduced the Rolex Perpetual, a self-winding watch with 360 rotating weight to power the watch through the wearer's arm. Notably, 1945 saw the introduction of a chronometer watch called the Rolex Date Just, which automatically changes the date on the dial, overtaking the Memo, an uncertified chronometer watch with similar characteristics. Likewise, 1954 birthed the Rolex Submariner, the first ever diving watch, and was made available to the public after it was introduced at the Basel Fair Show in 1954. Similarly, the Rolex GMT Master emerged in 1954. The Rolex GMT Master had all the features of other Rolexes combined. In addition, the GMT Master had a 24-hour design to keep 2 time zones. In 1955, Rolex added new features, a date and day aperture window, also introducing Rolex Milgauss in the following year. 4 years later, on the 6th of July 1960, Hans Wildsdorf passed away, leaving Rolex in the control and ownership of the Hans Wildsdorf Foundation. In 2017, Rolex was estimated to be worth $8 billion. As it stands, the estimation will move upward in the near future. That's all for today, guys. You can drop your comments in the comments section. Don't forget to like this video and smash on the bell icon to subscribe to this channel.